Hey everyone, my name's Brian. I'm a dad of many trades. I'm back with this Lenovo laptop that I've been working on. In the first video, I showed you how I installed Windows 10 onto the first drive. Now we're going to install the second hard drive, and we're also going to install the Ubuntu version of Linux on the second hard drive. So without further ado, let's get started. We're ready to get started with this Linux installation. So we've already got our drive prepared here. All we have to do is install it here in just a minute. But first thing we've got to do is download a bootable copy of Linux. And we're going to do this very similar to the way we did Windows. We're actually going to use the computer itself to do that. Open up our web browser right here, and we're going to go to whatever version of Linux you want to download. I've gone to ubuntu.com because I do like the Ubuntu version. And it's pretty simple, just got to download everything. I won't walk through all the steps on that. But the next stage is to open up another tab, and we're going to download this program called rufus.ie /en_us/. What this is going to be a bootloader program. Very similar to what Windows did. Windows actually has its own bootloader program to install Windows. Rufus is going to handle that for us for the Linux side. In the essence of time, I've already downloaded Rufus, so we're going to go over here to our downloads folder, and we're just going to launch Rufus from here. As soon as it opens up, just click yes here, and we'll be ready to go. In using Rufus to prep the drive, we're going to go here to select, and we're going to select the Ubuntu drive, and I'll tell you why it's named that here in just a minute. What you're actually watching is the second time around that I had to do this. Partition scheme. This is where things get a little tricky. Because of the age of the drive, I actually had to come back and do this a second time. I originally set it up as GPT when it needed to be in MBR. So if you do this yourself, make sure you do your research on this. Target system, there's only one option to choose here. Everything else here can be left as is. It's going to be a FAT32 file system format. That's just probably the most common Windows language there is. So we'll hit start, and right here we want to make sure we hit right ISO image mode. Reason for that is we're making this drive where it will install Ubuntu, not open as a bootable drive. It will take a little bit of time for the drive to format and for the computer to load everything onto the drive. So now that we've got that done, what we need to do is just shut down all of our apps. We're actually going to shut the computer itself down, and it's going to be time to do a little bit more hardware work. Now that we've got everything shut completely down, what we want to do is remove the old DVD, CD, Blu-ray drive out of the machine. On this particular machine, it's pretty simple. Doesn't have to be taken apart or anything. It has an unlock button on the back and this little ejector switch, so we'll just push down on that, and the CD, DVD, ROM drive just pops right on out of there. Now we've already got our Kensington SSD prepared in the caddy that will take the place of the CD, DVD, ROM drive. It has a SATA setup inside, so basically it should give us the same speeds as the other SSD that we put into place with Windows previously. Now, they did give us this little cover that goes over it, and it's supposed to, I guess, look like the outside of the CD and DVD-ROM drive, but as you can see, they did not notch it out properly. So that was a little bit of a problem. I didn't want this showing. So what I actually did is just kind of etched it out a little bit, took it back, put it on the bandsaw, and just basically did a little cutting to make it fit. Our next step is going to be to go back in and remove the other SSD that we put in earlier with Windows on it, because now we need to get the computer to boot into Ubuntu. So I'm just going to remove the panel. I had to stuff a little bit of foam up in here to hold the drive in place because it did not fit exactly like it was supposed to, but it is getting the job done. So we're just going to remove that drive completely out, set it over safely to the side. Now we're just going to take our battery, pop it back into place, turn it over, fire the computer back up, and let's see if we can get Linux installed. Before we start it up, we're going to take our USB drive and go ahead and slide it into the USB port. Very important to do this because when we start the computer up, we actually want it to use this drive to boot up with. So we've got our USB drive installed. We're going to start up the computer, and immediately I'm going to hold down the F3 button to go back into the BIOS again. What we got to do right here is just make sure our boot order is correct, because once again, just like we did with the Windows install, we got to boot from that USB drive. So once we get into the BIOS, we're going to go down here to Startup, Boot, and as you can see, the USB drive is still the primary boot. I must have left that in there when it was on Windows 10, when I should have gone back and changed it to the Windows drive, but it doesn't really matter right now because we're going to fix that later. So now we're just going to shut the computer back down and let it restart, and it should restart from the USB stick that contains the Linux boot system on it. So we'll just give that a moment here to fire up. And right now the computer actually wants to look for that Windows drive that we actually took out. So there we have it. We have loaded up. We're going to select Ubuntu right at the top. You do have several options right here. The only thing we're really interested in at this moment is just installing Ubuntu. You could install several different options, but let's just go with a simple install of Ubuntu. That's usually the best and easiest way to do this. So now it'll just take a minute for the drive to read it. So after a few minutes has passed here, we get up to the Ubuntu install. We're just going to do a simple install. I've tried Ubuntu before. I know how it works, but you do have that option to put it on a CD or something and run it off of that. Most of our options are going to be pretty pre-configured here. If you've ever installed an operating system before, it's mostly straightforward. You don't have a lot that you have to choose from. Obviously, we're going to do everything in English. Just continue through several other options here. We'll get our Wi-Fi taken care of. Go ahead and preset some updates. And now we just have to wait for it to load. So we'll just skip through a little bit of this. Now, after several minutes and going through several steps, installation is complete. So we just want to restart this and make sure everything fires up just like it's supposed to. Now we fully restarted. My profile was already set up, so I'm just going to log in here. After I log in, this will take obviously a couple more minutes as the computer just gets used to the new operating system. So I've skipped past a little bit here, but as we can see, everything came up just like it was supposed to. So now what we have to do is we're going to actually reinstall our Windows drive, and now we have to teach the computer that it wants to give us a choice when we actually boot up. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to shut down and reinstall this drive. Now we've reinstalled the Windows hard drive, and I did skip past that, but you've pretty much seen how I've done it so far. So immediately on reboot right here, we want to hit F3 again and go back into the BIOS. We'll give it just a minute to boot up into the BIOS. Going to hit our F1 to set up. So now what we want to do is we want to go down to Startup and go to our boot order. And what we're going to do is go down to number 7, which was the Kensington drive, and this is the drive that the Linux operating system is installed in. So we're going to use Linux to give us a choice as to what we boot into. So what we want to do is move the Linux drive to the very top of the boot order here. We don't need our USB anymore, so we're going to completely take it out. So we just take our Kensington drive and move it right up here to the top. Now we're just going to exit out of this. The rest of the boot order really doesn't matter. And once we've gone back into Ubuntu, now we get to play with the terminal just a little bit. Now terminal can be a little bit scary if you've never done anything with it before. For anybody who's used a Mac before, you know how the terminal works. It's where you can actually do some command line stuff on your computer and really drill down into the main part of the operating system to make it do some core stuff. But if you've never done it before, it looks a little scary. So It's really important that you be really careful whenever you do something like this. Make sure you do your research before you just go putting in random commands or anything like that. But once we get booted up here, we'll show you how this is going to work. Now that we've got everything booted back up, we're just going to go into search, and I'm going to type in terminal. And we're going to open this up as a new window. Now the command that we want to use here is going to be sudo sudo space update dash grub. We're going to hit enter and then enter our password. Now basically, if you read your lines right here, the next to last line says that Ubuntu has found that Windows exists as another hard drive on here. So what this will do essentially is give us the option to reboot the computer so that every time we boot up, it's going to give us the choice of which operating system and which drive we want to boot into. So we'll go ahead and power off right here. We're going to restart. This will take just a couple of seconds. And there we go. We have our new startup screen. So now we actually have the choice of which one we want to go to. Ubuntu's at the top, Windows 10 at the bottom. So we're going to go ahead and select Ubuntu, and we're going to just test this out here. So we'll boot into Linux first. And the boot's still a little bit slow, but considering the age of this computer and the SSDs that we have in place now and the extra RAM, this thing boots up really fast. As you can see, we're already booted into Linux. So we'll just go ahead and go through the whole process. And actually, I'm going to change my mind on that. Let's just go ahead and go do a restart right here. We know that Linux is going to boot up and work just fine, so we'll go ahead and hit a restart. And we're going to attempt to go with the Windows option next just to make sure everything's working okay. Now we're back up at the boot up screen. We're just going to tab down, hit Windows 10, and there you have it. The computer will now give us the choice each time we boot it up to go into Linux or Windows 10, so we're going to call this a great success. I was so proud of this build once I got it done that I actually took the computer with me the next day so that I could use it to do my job with for a day just to see how it would be. As I mentioned before, I normally work off of a MacBook, and I use a program called Parallels to run Windows inside of the Mac operating system, so that I've always kind of had the best of both worlds. And this is a very long explanation, but Windows and Parallels don't really play too well on the Mac with the newer versions, and I do have one of the newer MacBooks with the M1 Apple chip. But that's a discussion for a whole nother time. It was nice to have an actual dedicated Windows computer to do some things on that the Mac just really can't handle because our system that we use for work is just really not set up for it. I did have my iPad with me to kind of handle some other things that I may have had to do, such as managing the business and so forth. I don't think it would have been anything too intensive that the Windows computer could not handle, but being that I'm used to using a Mac, I'm used to the Apple ecosystem. I have certain programs that I use, certain file systems that I use, and the Windows computer is obviously not set up to do any of that. So that was just fine. I didn't mind switching over to the iPad when I had to change hats for a couple of minutes to handle something as far as running the business goes, or maybe just handling some church business. But at the end of the day, I'm really excited about this. I'm looking forward to using this for work some. I'm probably going to look up and play some older Windows games on this, just stuff that you can't get on the Mac or just really not built for the Mac. So kind of excited about that. I do enjoy retro gaming. As far as Linux use goes, I'm really excited about some of the stuff to do on Linux. Before this build, I really didn't know a whole lot about it, and I've just been kind of learning bits and pieces here. It is highly related to the Mac because they both are based off the Unix system. So I think I won't have too much of an issue playing with Linux a little bit and just really seeing what I could do, maybe doing some server stuff and things like that. But as I learn some new projects, I'll definitely update them on here. And I hope if you were good enough to stick around and watch all of this, maybe you learned something from it. I have to say that I learned a very good amount from doing this project. There was several things that I didn't know how to do and some stuff I had not done in years. So kind of had to relearn a bunch of stuff in order to do this. But if you have any comments about this, maybe you liked it, maybe you didn't like it, feel free to hit the thumbs up or thumbs down below. Feel free to give me any feedback that you may have. I really appreciate it. I've got a lot more videos coming out soon. For anybody who's been wondering, I will be doing something on beard care very soon. I don't know that it'll be the next video in line, but it's going to be coming up pretty quick. So stay tuned. Again, thanks for watching. I'm a dad of many trades.